Hi, my name is Haley Stapleton, and I will be presenting my school improvement plan that was an assignment for the Washington State University Administrator Program. So the problem that I will be focusing on are special education transition program students not meeting the reading goal mastery points. Just given the time constraint and the position that I'm currently in, I could not implement a school-wide change, so I decided to focus in on the program that I have a direct impact on, which is the transition program that is within the high school that I teach at. And within that, going to look at specifically the reading goals of my students and how and why and what we can do about them not reaching their mastery points. So the baseline data is from week 1, which is of May of last school year, and then week 9 starts September of this school year. The reason I needed a longer scope of data information, so I had to take data from last year and data from this year just comparatively, since September to October would not have been enough valid data to go on. So just looking at this graph, which we'll come back to a little later, but this is just laying out the student progress towards their reading goal. So I looked at 3 different students and I focused in on how well they were progressing towards their mastery point. Each of those mastery points are a little different. And each of the progress, as we can see kind of right now, is spread across the board, a little bit scattered everywhere. So students, based on that graph, are demonstrating on average less than 70% progress towards their individual mastery points. So student 1 is demonstrating about 58% progress, student 2 is 65%, and student 3 is 47%. So the reason I'm kind of focusing in on this is because all of this data is telling me that the current interventions and the curriculum used for the ELA classes are not aiding students in mastering their skills. So that is kind of the problem area that I'll be focusing in on, which leads to the goal of the improvement project, which I want the students within the transition program demonstrating 75% accuracy progression towards their reading goal mastery points during the 2024-2025 academic school year. So this will be a year-long improvement project. This assignment will show a snippet of kind of the beginning of the changes that I'm implementing and how effective or ineffective they are. And I'm hoping to continue this project throughout this school year, since I believe my students will need kind of the whole school year and that complete amount of time in order to truly, one, prove the effectiveness of the changes, and to give them that time so we can have a better chunk of data to analyze. So just a little bit of context about the transition program. It is a subgroup within the special education department in the high school that I work at. It is specifically designed for students who are significantly cognitively impacted by their disability. So that is looking at typically an IQ of less than 80, so 2 standard deviations below the norm. This particular program delivers intensive specially designed instruction because the needs of these students are higher than other special education students. So rather than a co-taught model or like a study skills class, these students are with me, my co-teachers, and the paraeducators for the majority of their day, and we are providing intense specially designed instruction for them so that they can progress with their academic and social emotional goals. Right now, our program consists of 3 teachers, so me and 2 co-teachers, 15 paraeducators, which is a giant team. Some of those paraeducators are transition program specific. Some of them are one-to-one, so student-specific paras. We have 25 students in total, which is much more than years prior. A few years back, we had about 10 total students, so we've more than doubled within that span of time. So this year is an especially large group of students. There's no set ELA curriculum for the transition program. There's no set kind of any curriculum for the transition program. Teachers are expected to create instruction centered around specific student goals. So what that would look like for the ELA curriculum is the majority of students this year are focusing on answering WH comprehension questions. So who, what, where, when, why, how, we throw in there sometimes. And those are based on functional texts. So News to You, which are news articles that are specifically designed for transition students. Menus, so we're looking at, pricing and things like that. And calendars, looking at weeks and dates and reading all of those kinds of things. So our curriculum, rather than being a novel that the whole class reads, and within that we study themes or characteristics or things like that, we take their reading goals and we create the curriculum around that. So given all of that information, right now, the start of my course of action is to analyze that current data. So the graph that we'll look at once again in a moment, interview my co-teachers and the administrator who oversees the special education department, map out the problem. So that would be in the fishbone diagram that we'll see, map out possible solutions. That'll be in the driver diagram, and analyze the new data that is based on the changes implemented. So the data that we take after we kind of problem solve and implement all of those changes. So back to the graph that we saw earlier, we're looking at that student reading goal data again. Breaking it down into highest accuracy points and lowest accuracy points. Student 1 had week 7 as their highest with 75% progress. Student 2 had weeks 8 and 12 with 80%, and student 3 had weeks 5 and 6 for 60%. The lowest accuracy points for student 1, they hit them a couple of times at weeks 4, 5, 9, and 10 of like 50% accuracy. Student 2 had weeks 1, 2, and 9 with 60% accuracy. And I am in the way for the other one. But student 3, their lowest was week 9 and 10. And let me see if I can pull that up. And they were, I believe, 47% accuracy. So right now, or based on that current data, we were kind of all over the board between May and September, October of this school year. And they hit their highest accuracy points and their lowest accuracy points. For the most part, the majority of the students hit them multiple times throughout that data collection timeframe. So then, given all of that data, I went to speak with my two co-teachers and the administrator who oversees special education to kind of go over the data with them, since analyzing the data independently is great, but having more eyes on it is always helpful. And then the key takeaways from those conversations included talking about summer vacation, accounting for the regression that we've seen in that graph, since most students do not access an extended school year. Summer break is just their summer break. Environmental factors like the classroom setup, the noise level that is happening within the classroom, or if behaviors are happening within the classroom, can account for the kind of mismatch in accuracy sometimes, because one day from another is very different. And then the biological factors that we might not always see or know about, that includes medication changes or medication introduction, their sleep cycle, and any home occurrences. And that could be any change in their routine, however, small that it may seem to us, will have an impact on them when they come to school as well, and their performance there. So going over all of that and breaking those problems down further is in that fishbone diagram. So going back through those specific factors, the biological factor, which is the mood of students, if they're happy or if they're sad, those both have a direct effect on their performance and the accuracy that they demonstrate. Medication change or introduction, or if students did not sleep well, which those oftentimes kind of go hand in hand sometimes. And so all of those things are affecting them at school. The classroom environment is another one. So it could be especially loud, which is very distracting. Their peers could be distracting, just given maybe behaviors are happening within the classroom that need attention or something of the sort. Or it's busy or there's constant movement. If there's just too many people within the classroom, if they're just moving around all the time, if with a team and as many students as we have, that can be a distraction as well. Vacations are another factor. So they don't have work over the summer to kind of work on maintaining those skills. There's typically regression with progress towards their goals over any kind of vacation. So we see it over a 2-week winter break, or the summer vacation is longer. And summer school is not available for all students. So students have to specifically qualify for the extended school year, and not all students do. So typically when their summer starts, that schoolwork ends. The curriculum is another factor. The work could be too challenging, or the work is repetitive or too easy. So those are two things that kind of affect them. Obviously, if the work is too challenging, that not only kind of impacts their mood as well, but that affects their performance. If the work is too repetitive or too easy, they may be scoring, hundreds across the board, and it wouldn't necessarily showcase their skills and what level they're at. And the work being not relevant to the student goals. So if we're looking at, maybe we were reading something different and not necessarily asking those WH questions, that's obviously going to affect their performance with those things because we're not practicing them as much. Home factors also would be not practicing at home. So, they have their school day, they go home, and then might not necessarily continue to work on those skills. Parent activities, if they're gone for a work trip or if they're just not home, that often has a major effect on our students and their performance at school. And then any disruptive factors, like moving is a very large one, but anything, it could be their swimming lesson getting canceled or their therapy session moving around. Those minor changes in routines can affect them as well. So based on all of that, we want to jump towards the driver diagram. So we have all of the problems. What are we going to do about them? Our goal, once again, is demonstrating 75% progress towards their mastery points, which, to reiterate, might all be different. So student 1 might have a mastery point of, 8 out of 10 opportunities they're answering things correctly. Student 3 might have 5 out of 10 opportunities. But all of them progressing 75% towards that point, whatever it may be. So step 1 would be curriculum modification, changing the scope and sequence to better target shared reading goals. So one thing we will do is implement the phonographics reading program, which is something that I've been taking a training on this year, and I think is very helpful with decoding and then building on those foundational reading comprehension skills. We'll provide summer work to continue the progress that has been made. We have not done that in the past, and that obviously will not be done right now, but we'll provide that summer work to see if that will help maintain. And then materials to focus on WH questions. So really focusing in on those reading goals and how we can have them progress with those specific goals and design those kind of work and tasks around that. Another thing would be para-educator training. So ensuring that paras are prepared and collaborating regarding student goals and performance. We will be providing training on how to record data, so that way we are all on the same page on how to accurately record how the students are doing. We'll have weekly meetings for updates and examining that data, so we can also have kind of a problem-solving moment of, if something is going wrong or if a para has a question, we can work all of those things out. And also create reference folders for paras with student goals. So that way that familiarity is there with the student goals, and the paras can reference that at any time, and they don't have to kind of question, oh, is the work I'm doing right now, is that relevant to their goal? And then the final thing will be the classroom environment. So structuring the learning environment to better serve students. So that would be rearranging the room to kind of encourage small group work rather than like a whole class instruction. Groupings based on skill level. So having students who might be, leaning more towards a second grade level work together, and students who might be in a first grade level working together. And then limiting distractions like decor and the foot traffic. So trying to limit the just amount of people in the same space. And that way the students have a better chance of focusing in on those tasks. So just breaking down all of those things. The curriculum, beginning to implement phonographics, we're aiming for 2 times a week to help students with their decoding and fluency, which are foundational skills for reading comprehension. And then this is just a photo of the idea behind phonographics, which is teaching students more based on pictures and symbols rather than like a older type of approach to decoding. So, the O and the E can make more than one sound or things like that. And so this would just be like kind of the spelling out, right? Like the sound ow is OW and cow, but it's also OU and out, right? So helping students kind of understand that those pairings are making those sounds, and it's not always, there won't be too many exceptions to the rules with this, instead to simplify that. The other thing we'll do are including text alongside functional materials, some of the menus and calendars, in order to assist students in honing their comprehension skills, while also being directly related to their reading goals. And then this work will be supplied over the summer as well. But these are just 2 examples of like a nonfiction text that we would use, and then some of the questions that we would ask, as well as like a more functional text like the calendar and the questions that would be paired along with that. Paraeducator training would be holding weekly meetings. We'll discuss a variety of things, so how to take data and any caseload updates that may be pertinent to that, and then creating reference folders and sheets for paras so they can familiarize themselves with data tracking, but also with the student goals. So one picture would be our data tracking key, so just so that we're all on the same page of how we're documenting these things. And then the other picture is just kind of our file foldum sister, so that would be like my caseload, the files with all of their goals and things like that on it. And then the classroom environment, I created groupings of students according to their ability levels, and then arranged the classroom to more easily facilitate small group work, which will then in turn limit distractions. So the small group will have less people in the room, and it'll provide a quieter work area. And then these things will be tracked and cross-referenced with the students' performance accuracy to see how effective they are. Another thing we're going to do is student input. So it'll include a student self-reflection sheet so they can mark down how they're feeling during a task. So that way we can get a better understanding of if a student is performing really poorly and we notice that they've been sad on all of those days, maybe that, that will have a correlation. So in order to measure the success of these changes, I'm going to continue to closely monitor the progress of my students with their reading goals. And then I'm going to cross-reference this progress with the data from the interventions. So the feeling scales, how the environment, noting if it's loud, if it's quiet, to ensure that the progress being made is due to the changes implemented and not just steady progress that we might see during the school year. And then I will put all the information in a graphic in order to visualize the effects on progress and then see if there are any significant impacts or things that maybe we need to continue to work on. So right now the results, this is as of December 2024, we can see that there's making pretty steady progress among the 3 students. And we'll kind of dive deeper into that in just a moment. But just visually, you can easier to see the kind of, and it's an ebb and flow, which is to be expected as well, but the kind of the trend upward of progress. So they varied overall. Students have been making progress. One student did plateau. So student 1 began at 58% progression towards their goal, and they're still at 58% progression towards their goal. Student 2 started at 65%, and now they're at 75%. And student 3 was at 45%, and we saw the most significant change, and they are now at 63% progress towards their goal. So this is just all reflective of kind of the changes that we've made, looking at that progress and that kind of maintenance of progress, then breaking down, okay, what is working and what isn't kind of working. So there's been a tracking increase. So regarding paraeducators, there's been a tracking increase. The data key aided a more consistent data tracking, which was then more easily comparable to judge effectiveness. So we've seen a more consistent form of how we're tracking and keeping record of the accuracy. The weekly meetings allowed for data analysis as well as problem solving specific aspects to programming that might be acting as unintentional barriers. So that has been so far helpful in working with paras to either work on specifically a part of a program or maybe a behavior with a student that is affecting them part of the programming. And the reference folders, we've seen since implementing, we've seen an increase in balancing student data. So tracking all students' goals instead of inadvertently focusing on only a few student goals because it served as a visual reminder. So looking at that kind of file folder, we can see, we've been looking at, student 1, we've been tracking them like crazy, but student 2's file is looking kind of empty. We should start really working and collecting more data on that. So that has been helpful for to reference the goals, but also just have that visual of making sure that we are keeping up to date with tracking everything. In terms of student reading goals, the student feeling scales are effective in establishing more accurate data. So the correlation between feelings and performance is emerging, right? That correlation we're kind of seeing. We've seen 85% of high performance data dates were connected to positive feelings. That being said, sometimes students do struggle with identifying their feelings. So for instance, student 2 often just said they were happy, even though in one situation, they were clearly frustrated and upset. But when we asked them, they said they were happy. So continuing to work on that so that way we can kind of continue tracking that correlation and seeing if there is a connection. The phonographics implementation is still new, but it has assisted student 2 and student 3 with improving their decoding skills, which was shown by just practicing with sight words with them. There was a 30% average increase between the two. Student 1, we saw more of a minor increase, but nothing significant. So the 30% average increase between the 2 other students was more promising. But once again, that is still a new implementation. So continuing to track that. WH specific work, there is an increase in available data, which assists with both analysis and student practice. So now that we're really focusing on those WH questions, there's been a significant amount of data that we can look at. And there's a significant more amount of practice that the students are getting. And then the small group work resulted in more targeted practice for students, which led to progress. So, for example, student 2 was having the most difficulty with when and why questions. And we were able to really see that in the small group work. And then we could focus more in on that and tailor instruction around that for them. So then they can increase and make progress on that goal. So the potential impacts of the project are pretty large scale. There is a possibility, right, that these changes that significantly better serve students. So one of the major changes would be developing an effective curriculum for transition center students. We don't have that yet. If we could find something that kind of works, especially for all of those goals that are WH focused, that would be incredibly helpful. It would also add helpful training opportunities for paraeducators within the district. So if all of these strategies that we're doing and implementing with the paraeducators work, we can then take that to the district, right, and say, hey, it might be really helpful to have a district-wide training on how to track data and things like that. So there's a possibility to expand this further within the school, within the district. But obviously, we're still tracking the effectiveness. So we're going to keep posted on those things and see at the end of the academic year to kind of see where we're at. So this project overall has shown just the importance of reflecting on teaching practices and data and implementing changes that are student-centered. I'm going to continue with these changes and monitoring them as the school year moves forward, because this is a small kind of data sample compared to what the whole school year will be. And I'm hoping that we will continue to see this kind of progress and be able to dig more deeply into what exactly is effective versus what is maybe the change wasn't as effective as we would have hoped. So far, everything has been showing minor to moderate progress, which is very promising for the rest of the school year. So I'm excited to see what there is to come. And thank you so much for listening to all of this and my presentation. And I hope you have a wonderful day.